I came across an interesting video the other day, and it's actually out of all people, it was Ben Affleck, who's an actor. I don't know if you guys know who that is, but it's besides the point. And he said something along the lines of the most potent and sort of sufficient way that he has found to break addiction has been suffering. And I'll end the quotations there from his perspective because I don't know how much more he elaborated on it. But it brought up an interesting thing in which this video is not going to be about addiction, but what it's going to be is it's about loops, it's about cycles, and it's about how no one and no amount of information is going to sort of give you that revelation that's actually going to walk the path for you. And oftentimes, it's really not about how many positive things happen to you before you shift your perspective, but rather how much suffering do you endure before you say, I can't do this anymore. And when you say I can't do this anymore, you mean I'll do anything to change my circumstances, to not live this same day over and over again. Because oftentimes when we get lost in the day to day, I often like to say that it feels like we're staring into the abyss. When you're living the same day over and over again, and maybe there's not even anything to look forward to. There's no incremental and radical change that may be awaiting you. Because think about it, when some of you who may be listening might be on the younger side, but when you're a kid and you're in school, there's always the next grade to go to. There's always the next school year. There's always the next summer break. There's always something to look forward to. There's always something to create a destination syndrome and fill in the lines of what otherwise is sort of empty. And for the rest of our lives, we are not kids, we are adults. And if you don't make a significant difference in your life, you're going to often find that things slowly begin to cement themselves in a way that is, it makes you angry. And we have to find that it's not really about what positive practices we do that are going to change our life, rather than what negative practices do we stop immediately as a result of enduring so much suffering. And I think there's two ways to go about this, right? I think the one reaction you might have to what I'm saying right now is a sort of impulsive emotional reaction. And I think to make a real difference, I think we actually need to wait that one out. There's an emotional and sort of invigorating response that comes about after hearing this information, almost like a wave of motivation that comes at like 2 in the morning, you know? And we can't confuse that for the actual stable motivation. What we really want is to sleep on it and the next morning find cracks in our day to day life, find these little things that are making normalcy feel too comfortable. And what I mean by that is, what is it that's making your days feel so similar? What is it that's making the abyss so void of any sort of destination? What it often is a combination of negative tendencies, a combination of negative habits, beliefs, and whatever else that are fueling the perspective that there's nothing waiting for you on the other end. And to be honest, this can be true. If you're not doing anything in a material sense in your life to make any sort of difference to improve the conditions of your life, then no amount of psychoanalytical work is going to change the fact that you're not actually making an effort into improving your life in a practical way. And the second sort of way that I think, and this is probably what applies to most of you, is that we actually have these belief systems that we don't want to think that we are actually still holding on to, but our actions would speak otherwise. If I were to ask you, do you believe this certain thing about yourself? And then I watched you and your actions throughout the day, your actions might tell a very different story than what you're trying to posit as a belief of who you are. Because there's layered belief systems. There's the beliefs that we're consciously trying to uphold. We're trying to say, I'm more confident, I'm this, I'm that. And that's good. We should keep affirming that. That's an affirmation practice. And it'll help neuroplasticity take effect. But more so, there's like a middle and even lower ingrained beliefs that only actions can actually define and only actions can break them apart. So imagine your life on paper. all the actions you've been taking, what does it say about who you are? Is there anything notable? If I were to look at your life on paper and if I were to see the actions that you take every day, would I be able to note anything in particular that is making your life either better or worse? And oftentimes it's quite obvious. You read, okay, I wake up at this time, then I do that, then I do this, then I do that. And you go all about your normal actions throughout the day and you say, I'm not that happy with this. Or you could say, there's a leak in the engine and you could see it right there. It's on a piece of paper. Whether it's I'm spending 4 hours on my phone at the end of the night, or I'm refusing to, go out of my comfort zone and all I do is stay home. There's an obvious thing that you could see on that piece of paper that's causing either a leak in the engine or that's causing a stagnancy that is not challenging you and is not providing you any sort of conviction that there is a point in any of this. You need to create meaning. You need to create a point for yourself. Because when you're staring into the abyss, if there's no opportunity, if there's nothing, there's no light at the end of the tunnel, or at least it feels like that, then yeah, misery is probably one thought away. Because all you have to do is realize that there's nothing lying ahead for me. But it's okay. Because if you're in that place where you feel like you're staring into the abyss, it's just that now you're coming to the realization that the abyss is an invitation to create something for yourself. And that's what it is. What most people do is turn their backs to the abyss. They turn their backs to the fact that they're not satisfied. They turn their backs to the fact that they regret not doing this and that. They turn their backs to the fact that they're not happy with the way they've gone about things. They turn their back to the addiction. They turn their back to the addiction to social media, whatever it may be. I'm kind of running out of ideas here. I don't want to go too specific. But they turn their back to that sort of empty, dull feeling in which they know is kind of the fuel behind their anger. And why do we think we have so many angry people in life? Because oftentimes anger is regret turned sour. And that's what we often find in people, is that the very people that they judge, the very people that they criticize and hate often embody qualities that they were once too afraid to act upon, desires they were once too afraid to pursue because of the fear of embarrassment, the fear of what other people may think of them. And now we have people who are happy and satisfied with their lives, and then we have a lot of people who are angry. And it's because, however old you are now, add another 30, 40 years of just that. I don't know about you, but that scares me. That scares me more than anything else. I can't bear living the same day over and over again, knowing I only get one life. As far as we know, we only get one life. I am under the assumption that we only get to do this one time. And so, yeah, one of my worst fears is living that same day over and over again. And it's not just me. We all have this fear. Of course we do. Why wouldn't we? Do any of us want to be lying on our sofa chair when we're significantly older and look back at our life in regret? No. So what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do every day about it? What are you going to do to change the circumstances? And this is what it comes down to. How much suffering is enough for you? For some, it takes 30 days. For some, it takes a year of suffering. For some, it takes 10 years of suffering. For some, it takes their whole life. For some, never is enough. And I don't mean to be cynical. I don't mean to be, fear-mongering. It's not what I'm trying to do at all. If anything, I'm telling you all of this because it's the most hopeful thought that I can actually think of, that there's actually no science behind it. It's that when you finally had enough, your care of the things that are sort of surface level compared to that suffering is going to be diminished. And this is what I mean. If you go 10 years never putting yourself out there and you beat yourself up about it every single day, the fear of rejection, the fear of embarrassment, the fear of being judged is now going to seem very small compared to the amount of suffering that you've just experienced all this time. All of that suffering compared to the unknown idea of what embarrassment, judgment, or even regret might feel like, you're going to say enough is enough. You're going to say, I've already experienced the suffering. if embarrassment, if judgment, if whatever that is, if that's suffering too, screw it. I'm at least going to experience that because there might be a reward in that at least. And that's what it comes down to. How much suffering is enough? How much misery is enough? How much self-pity is enough? How much doubting yourself is enough? And yeah, we can't forget to look at it in two different ways. Whereas if we're not taking any practical, physical, material action in our life, then of course nothing's going to change at all. And if we're not taking any sort of inner action, nothing's going to change either. And I actually want to make a sort of practice out of the latter, and that is, why do we keep accepting certain thoughts? Why do we keep accepting certain beliefs? And I think we're under the false impression that we can't just say to ourselves, I don't accept that. When a thought comes, I don't accept that. When a belief comes, I don't accept that. When a doubt comes, I don't accept that. If it comes, don't take it. I don't want it. When doubt comes, when self-pity comes, when any of this stuff comes, I don't want it. You tell the brain you could keep it. I don't want it. Wherever you pulled that from, put it back. I don't want it. I'm not taking it. I'm not going to engage with that. Because that's what it needs you to do. That's what the brain needs you to do for it to actually flourish. If the brain sends you a thought of self-pity, of doubt, of lack of belief in yourself, why do you think it stays longer than you want it to and longer than it was intended? It's because you're engaging with it in a way that's showing your mind that you actually want to have it and you want it a part of your life experience. Instead, say to yourself, I don't accept that. I don't want it. I'm not taking it. I'm not going to engage with it. Whatever it is, in a weird way, you can ignore it. And I don't mean ignore it because I know a lot of people get triggered by the word ignore your thoughts or whatever else because everyone likes to use the word observe instead. But if you just ignore all of your thoughts are going to slow down. I mean, that's just how the mind works. And people don't like that radical, and it sounds like ignorant advice, but if you ignore every single thought, your thought processing is going to become slower. Not your mental capabilities, but the actual thoughts that you receive are going to come through to you at a slower and less rapid speed because you're not engaging with them anymore. Your mind prioritizes what you engage in. If you just don't engage with it, you will be free of it. You're suffering either way. So why not suffer through the tense unknowingness of not being able to react to that thought? Why not suffer through the tense itch that is wanting to engage with negative ruminations and self-doubt and self-pity and all these things? You're going to suffer either way. You got to choose your suffering because one of those sufferings is actually going to lead to you finding a way out. Just try this. One sentence. I don't accept that. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 words. 4 words. I don't accept that. Someone tells you something you're not capable of. I don't accept that. Not possible. I don't accept it. And you know what someone who is a cynic, who is wallowing in their own misery is going to say? They're going to say you're delusional. You're delusional. The line between radical self-belief and delusion is quite thin. But delusion, I would say, is doing... It's kind of, I forgot who defined madness like this, but it's the same thing. Delusion is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Yeah, but don't do the same thing and don't do the same thing and expect a different result. Do different things. Don't place the radical self-belief in the fact that everything's going to work out exactly how you imagined. Place radical self-belief that no matter how the cards change and no matter how the forces, maneuver, that you are capable of adapting to that and still creating a life for yourself and creating those opportunities and the things you want. You're not placing radical self-belief in the fact that everything needs to be picture perfect. You're placing radical self-belief in your own ability to make things better as a result of the hands that you're dealt. People who are overly cynical like to act like they know everything, but deep within, oftentimes, there is some sort of anger, there is some sort of resentment for what they never tried to do. In their overly cynical, in their overly practical approach, they miss a very important characteristic of life, and that is that there are people who do things that are not ordinary. You don't have to be average. If you surround yourself with people who are always prioritizing being practical and being real and being grounded. You know, that's where they're finding their pride in. They're finding their pride in being practical. But they should be more prideful of their ability to change their circumstances in any which way that they want. Talk to someone who has done something quite miraculous with their life, someone who has taken ideas from their imagination and their creative pursuits and actually made it a reality and they're living the life that they want. Talk to them versus someone who is very quote unquote practical, and see the way that they talk about themselves. See the difference in the way that they view life. One of them often has a quite, I don't want to say mystical view of life, but they understand that there are things that can't be explained. And as a result of aligning yourself with a certain framework, with a certain mental framework, with a certain optimism, that you can tap into a version of yourself, you can tap into a certain reality of your life that you wouldn't have been able to if you were always grounded and practical. The best at what they do, in any case, the people who have made the most of their lives, even the people who have simply overcome things and traumas, whatever else that they never thought they could, it isn't always the result of being overly cynical and overly grounded, but rather it's the result of believing in a version of yourself that does not yet exist. So again, how much suffering is enough? How much of the same day over and over until you'd rather do anything than live that day again? Because that's what it comes to. It comes to a certain realization that you say, I would rather do anything than just keep living like this, because I can't do this for the rest of my life. This same misery, this same self-doubt, this same lack of belief in myself. If anything, I'm just going to keep putting myself out there, keep trying, keep leaving my comfort zone, keep pursuing my passion, my excitements, until I land somewhere even remotely close to the life that I want. Then I might think about accepting the terms and conditions. Then I might think about accepting the plate and the cards that I've been dealt. But for now, I don't accept anything less. I will not accept anything less, and I will not stop trying different things until I get even remotely close to the life that I want and becoming the person that I want. That's what it's about. There's even a affirmation practice that I like that's quite, I don't know, I consider it quite radically optimistic, where you say, you wake up in the morning and you could either write this or say it to yourself, whatever. You say, I woke up a different version of myself today. I woke up operating from a higher state of being today. Today marks a new chapter. Today marks things flowing in my direction. Today marks a new found set of confidence. Today, everything changed. And you could keep telling yourself this. When those old patterns, those old realistic quote unquote thoughts that are quite cynical, the same ones that have been dragging you down the whole time, you say, I don't accept that. Today I woke up a different version of myself. And that's the truth. And I'll keep attaching myself to that truth until it permeates every little aspect of my life and completely changes who I am. Today I woke up a different version of myself. That's a fact. That is a fact. And no one can tell me any different. That's it for today's video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm going to leave a link in the description to my book. If you want to read it, it goes over this and much more. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, thank you as always. And other than that, I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.